Today I'm speaking with Andrew Grant. Andrew is a spiritual teacher who had an awakening experience after getting punched in the face and having a
Mhm.
concussion. That triggered an awakening experience for him, at which point he studied from traditions all across the globe, including meditation, Hinduism, and even shamanism from Canadian natives. Andrew, welcome to Behind the Grid.
Thank you, Chris. Good to be here.
Andrew, you have such an interesting backstory. One of the most interesting that I've heard in terms of an awakening experience. Can you tell us how that happened? How did it go about? How did you go about getting awakened through this process? And was it your fault that you got punched in the face, or do you feel it was unfair?
Well, I can go into it a little bit. Yeah. Yeah. So, I can't speak to whether it was my fault. I believe in karma. Everything that happens for a reason. So I'll just take it and I won't point any fingers. I will say I wasn't opposing antagonistically this individual, but it's all right. Anyhow, the important thing was the recovery process, which was fascinating for me. It really forced me to look within because you're sort of in a self-imposed retreat when you are recovering from concussion. You have to dim the lights, no stimulus, external stimulus, no light from televisions, computer screens. Your attention span is lower. You don't want to stimulate your attentional capacity. So you basically just have to sit there with a blank mind and just experience everything. So it's a way to force you into meditation naturally. Coincidentally, I discovered formal techniques like meditation and yoga. And practicing within this context without distractions, I was able to kind of get to states of peace and joy where I was able to have an authentic awakening experience, you could call it. And yeah, so that was the beginning, really.
Oh, that's fascinating. Can
Mhm.
you help me understand what it's like to be in that concussion state? You said that everything was dim, but like, what do you do with your time? Because I'm just imagining it would be like a vipassana, like hours and hours and
Yeah.
hours, days of nothing.
Yeah, no, that's a good analogy because it's amazing, right? It's amazing how much we fill our days constantly with stimulus, activity, doing. And when you are in this state, you need to really go within because you become hypersensitive to external stimuli, particularly light or electromagnetic energy or whatever. And if you overstimulate yourself, you'll have a setback. You'll get a headache. You will be KO'd. You won't be able to do anything. And it gets worse, gradually worse and worse, builds up on each other. And you need to stay below that threshold of overstimulating yourself so that you can remain in the healing state, the state of rest. So it's important to monitor your behavior. It gets self-discipline becomes tantamount importance, paramount importance. And yeah, and it's not easy because we have habits of craving, going outwards, needing stimulation constantly. So basically it's a real struggle at the beginning to control your emotions and your needs and your all the environmental things that you crave. And it's a painstaking process of learning to self-discipline, essentially.
Yeah, I mean, that makes so much sense. I can only imagine how much discipline you'd be forced to grow in really,
Hmm.
really quickly because of that experience.
Yeah, exactly.
I want to find what was it like when you initially started having some sort of spiritual experience or self-aware experience. What was it like in that sort of concussed or semi-concussed state where you started to find that self-awareness growing?
Yeah. Well, it was really amazing. So it was almost like how would you put that? I didn't need faith because I didn't have to intellectually grasp the technique so much. I didn't have to go so intellectually deep, read so much about it. I had a context growing alongside my experience, but I remember there was this one point where I was totally isolated. I was meditating, and I just started having these, waves of bliss, and I was like, wow, like this is amazing. Like I'm in my injured state. I've been feeling despair, and now I'm feeling, some of the greatest states of joy I've ever felt. So it was just kind of surprising, and the shock of feeling that was what really kind of captivated my attention, and it really drove me to explore the traditions with a level of gravity. Like I had an authentic realness that I'd experienced, so I needed to take it seriously, and that's really what triggered the continuance of it, I would say.
Wow, I can only imagine being in so much pain for so long, emotionally, physically, and then just suddenly having that wave of deep bliss. I totally know what that's like. I've had a few of
Yeah.
those experiences myself. That must
Yeah,
have been a big
yeah.
relief.
Temporary, but yeah.
Yeah, of course, because if you clutch onto it, then you're back in misery again. So,
Learned that one the hard way, I guess.
so, it took you, I'm assuming, many months to recover from this process. How long? How long exactly?
Well, the recovery took about a couple of years, and it's hard to distinguish, because it coincided with this awakening process. It brought upon a different lifestyle, so it's hard to gauge what it was like before and what it was like after. It was, and it's all just life. It's all just the whole journey is happening, and I can see that even beyond this awakening label and my sleep label of my adolescence, childhood, it's all the same journey, it's all the same happening, and there's a continuation of something beyond all of these identities that I attribute to Andrew awakened or Andrew asleep. There's something there that runs through all of that. But yeah, it's resulted in a context and a framework now that I function from very differently, and it's almost acute because the culture we have it's at odds, you could say, with this way of functioning. So
Yeah,
yeah.
everything in our culture is vying for your attention, is trying to hype you up and make you on high alert, high stimulation. So when the way you're talking about your new state of being was exactly the opposite of that. It was much more relaxed.
Precisely.
So what were the first things you went and did after you were I guess like healed, but you're saying that it
Yeah.
was more of a gradual process. But what were some of those first things that you explored?
Yeah. Yeah. So I definitely began with the body, healing the body through yoga, trying different yogas, learned to calm the body with meditation. I got deep into meditation when I started getting into the Vipassanas, as you mentioned, where you sit down for long periods of time and you scan the body and you get body awareness. And when you do that in like quarantine, it's like a self isolation setting. You really are you're just paying attention on it when you're on a retreat setting. That's when I really had an opening, and that's when it coincided with my exploration of psychedelics, wanting an actual firsthand experiences of all that I had read in a more direct way.
What psychedelics did you try, and what experiences did you have?
Yeah, I tried mushrooms, ayahuasca, LSD. I had some profound experiences on all three. They were definitely a way to develop faith in the more mystical leanings of the spiritual path that you would lead. So it was there was many experiences, but really it develops faith, and it shows you a possibility. It was like my meditative experience, but in a different, more, you could say, visual way of developing the vision. There's different chakras. You develop the vision. My meditative was more of a heart awakening, I would say. But yeah, many experiences.
Yeah, for me, I had a similar experience where I did DMT for the first time, and I was always in my head. I was always thinking, and that was like the only processor I used. And then as soon as I did DMT, I met an entity um, which dropped the energy from my head into my heart, and I was able to now use my heart as like a processor. So it's similar to what you said about it opening your heart and awakening your heart. Did you have an experience like I had where you met an entity or anything?
Yeah, you could say, definitely. I mean, you go into these different realms. There's beings, and you can talk to them. You can learn. It's an interesting space, no doubt. The psychedelic space. It's totally acute with what we experience in the everyday, and I definitely, gained a depth of my being from that. And my struggle was to try and integrate it, because it was beautiful. When you come into the heart, it's something that you want to taste again and again. Like it's a nectar that you want to drink of. And the challenge is to integrate it, which again, it's just part of the process. But it's that's a beautiful aspect of the path, is when you touch a state of the heart, and you can learn to integrate that into your daily life.
So how did you integrate it?
Well, that is something that I practice. It's a practice. This is a traditional practice done in many different religions, many different faiths or traditions. For example, there is actually a yoga of the heart, bhakti yoga, devotional yoga. It's a way to cultivate your heart. It's a way to cultivate a relationship with God. So a relationship with everything. And it's actually the yoga of relationship. So you cultivate it through other human beings, but ultimately you're cultivating a relationship with the greater one, and you're cultivating a heart relationship, a relationship of love, through the practice of bhakti yoga, seeing everyone as the divine, as the beloved, the one you love, and just loving it. That's essentially it. And there's different forms to the practice. There's practice of singing songs of love, or chanting on the name lovingly, chanting, and there's many different practices, but it's the yoga of love, really, yoga devotion.
Wow, that's really interesting, because I think a lot of people process their experiences very psychologically, or just with time. Like they'll have a sharing circle where they'll share after ayahuasca, and they'll just talk about their experience, or they'll just sort of have emotions come and go, and thoughts come and go during the next weeks and months and years after their experiences. But it's interesting that you took the approach of actively working on a heart chakra, actively singing and resonating that area of the body to speed up and process your experiences.
I was just going to say, yeah, speaking of the heart chakra, yes, it can be seen energetically, right? Actually processing through the heart chakra, and all these chakras are just different levels. They're just different ways of being, ways of seeing. And the heart is a beautiful space. It's actually like the space of beauty. Everything is love. Everything you function. The world is love. Love is the strand that flows through the universe. It's the dark matter permeating below the surface. It's just everything, and that's the space of the heart. And it's truly beautiful. And seen through the energetic. It's in the center. It's the body, the center of our being, down in the chest. A place we come to through practices, and we can return again and again. And it's a meditative space that I tasted that first time. When you taste it, you want it again.
I totally know what that's like. Yeah, it's interesting that you described it as beauty. That reminds me of the center of the tree of life. Did you study any tree of life or Kabbalah?
A little bit, yeah. It's fascinating, their system. It's extensive. They have a whole map out over, what are they called? Each node. It's called
The
something.
Sephira?
They're cool. Like it's way out there. I like it.
I'd be interested to know how you transitioned from that, from the integrating your psychedelic experiences, and from the let me see if I have the story right, because we might not have it exactly linear, but you had a concussion, you did meditation, and then was it like after that then you started to explore entheogens and psychedelics, or did you go and do some other spiritual paths after that?
Yeah, I've tried everything at once. Yeah, they say you start off eclectic, and then you find your way into what is actually more aligned with yourself. But yeah, so how did it come about? I mean, the transmission of devotion is just through people you meet. Really, you meet the living presence of love in someone, and then you want more of that. I've tried many things. Like I've tried meditation. Like I've gone on some pretty intense meditation retreats, and it's interesting, no doubt. You go deep into your body awareness. I think there's only so much of that you can do, though, as a Westerner, or at least my own path. Like it's hard to just sit in like the vibrational body, sensation, and be totally content, and having all the stuff of Western upbringing. But I also tried working with that energy through Kundalini and Kundalini yoga and that kind of stuff. And that's also interesting, where you actually take that energy, manipulate it into coming in different spaces of your body, and watching the actual effects, or the different ways it affects you. And that's also very interesting and fun, and it's powerful. That's what it is about. It's about cultivating the Kundalini, which is Shakti, the power. And that's an interesting path as well. I've done some of that. I've done I've done many different things, and it's all valid. And I think they all interplay with each other once you start getting into a more holistic, mode of being. You can use different practices from different traditions. A path is not just, as we've been taught, like a particular set of steps ordained by a particular organization. Like everyone's path is personal, and you can study many different things and integrate them into your own way.
Yeah, I love the diversity of your path. It's something that speaks to me, because I also have studied so many different types of traditions, and so many different types of spiritual traditions. I think one of the ones that excites me most is your time with that native training, where you went and you did sort of like a general training from different native cultures in Canada. Can you share a bit about what you got from that, like what you took away from it, and what that whole experience was like?
Yeah, for sure. So I've studied with indigenous cultures in the southern hemisphere in South America and in the northern hemisphere in Canada. And there's interesting similarities, I would say, that you know, it's not exactly coherent with all this other stuff you learn. You know, they're a naturalistic culture, and they have a strong connection with the earth, with the collective. And you know, we as a society are very much disassociated from exactly those things, the earth and the greater community of humans, animals, plants, minerals, everything. So it's really a return to the root. If we're going to talk in terms of the chakras, it's a return to the root chakra of the earth and learning to reconnect through that. And it's fascinating. I mean, it's totally relevant for humanity. You know, like, people need to reconnect with the earth. And it's a good time right now to do it, I would say. When the earth is saying, listen.
So one of the main things that you found is that they both in the north and the south, they have a strong connection with the earth. I totally would expect nothing less. But what are some of the other different teachings, or maybe more specific teachings that you've found were very valuable for Westerners?
It's a good question. Well, yeah, I mean, you can connect through the earth in many different ways, you know, or like these ancient cultures had, they were more advanced than we'd like to give them credit for. You know, there was a lot of ignorance in the side of Western society. For example, they not only are connected with the earth, but all of the effects on the earth, such as the cosmological effects, right? This is the impact of the celestial bodies, as I was saying earlier. But for example, you know, the sun, in its coronal holes are spots where solar wind will eject out of the sun, come into the Earth's atmosphere and create geomagnetic storms. This is a literal phenomena of the impact of celestial bodies on the Earth, you know. So if you are aware of this, and you pay attention to it, and you pay attention to its effects, and you map them out, then you'll be aware of the impacts, and you'll see over time repetitions. You'll see what means what. Right now, it's a new moon. We're in Aries, so if you're feeling a fiery wind coming from the sun, maybe you'll know why. You know. So that's one of the ways they do it. They're totally in touch with all of the natural phenomena happening around them, to interconnection with nature. And it depends on the techniques they use. They use different techniques. Different cultures use different techniques.
I'd love to hear more about this native astrology. Which tradition is it specifically? I imagine they would have different types of astrology between different tribes. Is that true?
It probably is. I would think that I would think that it would be, you know, it would depend on the cultures. I think it goes beyond just the indigenous people. Like, I think astrology anywhere is probably comes from their culture. So if you look at Western astrology, it's from the Greek culture, right? Like, and you'll see that it's the characters from their stories, right? Aries is the god of war. In the moon, the new moon, which came yesterday, is in Aries, and it's the god of war in Greek mythology. And it's a fire sign. So if you just basically look at these two details and see, maybe that's more pertinent to a Western person, I don't know, but that's how you would do it. They probably have different names for their constellations or different names for their planets and all that kind of stuff. All that kind of stuff.
Okay, I mean, that makes sense. So then, yeah, there would be small variations and differences between these different tribes, most likely, that would use especially like their local characters from their own folklore to describe the energies of the planets and stuff like that. Uh, what could you tell us about the native astrologies that you have learned? Like, what are the way that they look at the planets? What are their names for them, and what do they mean? Do you know? Did you study that?
I did. I mean, I studied that, and I studied basically what I learned is that each person and each collective will actually have their own experience of it. The way I experience it right now is through this this fire and this solar wind, you could say. That's how it comes through. But yeah, the cultures did have their systems, their maps, like any cultures. Like in the ones I studied used the medicine wheel. Medicine wheels are just a cultural map of the stars of life of everything, and it's pretty in depth. I don't know if it's something I could explain in this podcast. It's a whole thing.
Is there a way you could give people a link to it? Like maybe I can post a link in the description so that if people wanted to learn more about the medicine wheel, they could click on the link and it would take them to something that would explain it.
Yeah, I could give you something like that.
Cool.
Something like that.
Yeah, I mean, to me, it's really interesting because I find that different cultures have all these different ways of looking at the stars. Like there's Vedic astrology, there's the Western astrology, there's Chinese astrology. Those are probably the three biggest ones. And then to compare what I know from those and to mix that with some of the native astrology, I think I'd learn some cool connections, some like cool things would be triggered in my brain. So it'd be fun to check that out.
Yeah. Cool.
So, okay. So with the native culture, you learned astrology. You learned just general earth connecting procedures, I imagine, like different rituals that you could do to connect with the earth. What are some of the other rituals and experiences that you had with these native cultures, both in the north and the south?
So we would do ceremonies. We would do our ayahuasca, and we would do ceremonies with the medicine wheel. Different ceremonies, both using ways to connect with, in the case of the medicine wheel, the earth and the stars and the moon and the sun. And with ayahuasca, we would be connecting with basically spirits in the traditions, in the lineage.
So you connected with spirits in their lineage through ayahuasca.
Yeah. I mean, that's what these traditions are. They're a lineage of beings. Any tradition is a lineage of teachers and beings who bring forth a certain energy or a certain tradition. And in the case of the ayahuasca, it was a certain lineage, and we worked with the beings there, and that was how we connected. That was our connection to something greater, is through these beings and these entities. Yeah.
Can you share what it's like to talk to these beings or describe some of their personalities? Because like try to bring people who haven't been on this experience into that experience that you had, where you're talking to this entity, or maybe it's more psychic, but there's some form of communication.
Yeah. Well, okay. How shall we go about this? You're asking me to translate the language of visions and dreams, but
You gotta try. We'll take it with a grain of salt. We'll know that it will be a flawed representation. Okay, that's a disclaimer.
Yes, right. Because this plane is relative, that plane is relative, and there are different ways, there are different languages that we use to describe the essence of either, right? So the essence of both is the same. This one is a language that is adjacent to this rationalistic, egoic consciousness that you have. Always got to do that disclaimer. Always got to do that disclaimer. So, yeah, the language, it's a good question. My experience was, yeah, you have visions, you know. You have visions, and you experience a poetic visionary language communicated through deep spiritual emotions, symbols, you know, a feeling of something, another there, you know. It's just the language of the spirit, you could say. It's a different way of talking. It's something you take with faith, and faith doesn't mean blind believing. Faith is something that your rational mind can't explain in that moment. Although you're having maybe an experience so deep that it just says, I don't need to question. I don't need to, you know, pry into that aspect of things. There's an internal validity in these wisdom traditions, in these intuitive wisdoms, you know, and intuitive ways of knowing. That's it, really. It's just a different language. It's a different language. It's like, okay, here's a good way where I can explain different languages that humans can use to communicate. In the Bible, in the book of John, he says the Word is God. The Word. To him, language is God to him, you know, this language, the system of symbols, the way that humans communicate with each other, that's God. And there's different ways, right? So there's the Word is God. And there's different, this is actually a commonality, this is a common point between different traditions, okay? Different languages that are used to express the same thing. So in Hinduism, we have the word Om, and that is the all-encompassing word. It encompasses all of vibration. Whereas for Johnny, his word is more on the semantic side, and in my opinion, he emphasizes the word as in language, the linguistic aspect. In the Hindu scriptures, they emphasize the vibrational aspect of the word. Although word is language, it is auditory. It has a semantics. It has a vibratory aspect to it. So this word in Hinduism, Om, is the encompassing of all of vibration. And this is an interesting way to bring it back to the scientific aspect, because in the scientific paradigm, you can conceive of the universe as vibration. You can conceive of particles turning into waves. You can conceive of matter as vibrating energy. So although these perspectives, you know, are somewhat acutely different, there's commonalities, and they all draw back to a fundamental truth. So the languages that they use, they say the word is God. So there's the language of stories, right? It's the language of symbols and systems of symbols. And, you know, if you ever hear a good story, it's almost a complete experience. It satisfies your rational mind, it satisfies your emotional mind, your visual mind. It's all of these things. And this is a way to really communicate. If you want to communicate with the spirit, you just learn the language.
So you're saying to communicate with the spirit, you need to learn the language of the spirit, and that has to do with just different vibrations. And could they be perhaps more primal than language itself, where it's just more intuitive expressions like Om, like you could have that basic one, or it could be just like even like ah, or ooh, like whatever the sounds are that are coming to you.
Yeah, you can connect with the language of the spirit through any of the aspects of language. So you could connect vibrationally through chanting Om sonorously, like Om, deep sonorous Om. And then you could get in contact with the primal aspect of language, the essence of language that is below and beneath language as a whole, the phenomenon of language as a whole. Or you could connect with the aspect of language that is storied, the aspect of language that is so poetic, that has an internal poetic validity, so that you develop some sense of intuitive awareness of something else that, connects you to the same thing, essentially.
Wow, I'm there's so much there to unpack. It's funny because I was reading recently. I mean, I read this all the time, but the Hermetic teachings in the Kabbalion, the ones as they're laid out there, and it talks about everything is mind and everything is vibration, and then when we bring in science and there's a vibration aspect to mind, like there's like thought waves, like I think that's it all just like seems to come together. All these different religions, all these different faiths, science included, just mixes together in this big one worldview that kind of goes beyond words a bit.
Yeah, beyond words. That's funny.
Andrew, how would you describe your worldview now? You've been around the world. You've had incredible experiences. How, if you had to piece your worldview together in words, knowing that it's flawed when you do that, how would you describe it?
Okay. So yes, I would say the universe is the word. The universe is language. The universe is vibration. And everything I can experience will have this layer upon it. So my physical experience is layered with this aspect of language, right? I cannot perceive something without this internal universe layered upon it. So in fact, I've reversed the primacy of the physical universe in this other aspect. I now go the other way. I say, is it possible that the language is God, that the word is God, that the internal perspective actually creates my outer reality? Is it possible? And yes, is the answer that comes. So that is basically where my worldview is at. I see in terms of the word. I see in terms of vibration. And yes, I have faith, but faith is not blind, right? Faith is actually seeing. You see and you hear. Important. So I have an internal orientation, but I see outwardly. I experience the world and I listen to the world in a way connected to nature, right? I listen to the energy coming from the sun impacting our atmosphere, creating disturbances and affecting us. I listen to, the winds. I listen to anything and realize that layered upon this, my internal song, my internal story, it's all one with it, and it's creating and weaving together a tapestry of my life. It's creating the tapestry of the universe, and that to me is what life is. That's what the universe is to me.
Yeah, I mean, that's so poetic. Very beautiful. Yeah, I mean, I love the different ways these components come together for you. It makes a lot of sense to me. It's so hard to piece things together, but I think one of the key moments that stood out to me from what you said is when you take the world in reverse. So a lot of people have this idea that they're looking in the external world and then creating beliefs internally, and it's sort of out to in, but you're saying in fact it's flipped, and you know that your reality is created from the mind, and so you start there initially and then you work your way out. So given that, how would you describe the craziness going on in our society right now? Would you say that Andrew, you are complete batshit crazy because of all the crazy stuff going on, and so your mind is manifesting this virus in the population, or even more accurately, this media scare in the population?
Okay. Okay. What's happening? So what's your question exactly? It's like, what is going on? What's going on with?
No. Because your mind is creating your
Yeah.
reality. Like, what is it you're believing that's making this crazy
Oh,
reality occur to you?
yes. Well, it's a good question, right? And if everything's inside, then how is the world the way it is? And how can you, as a sane person, accept the world and yourself? Um, yeah, that's a challenge. That's like an ever-pressing challenge. And yes, the world is difficult right now. We have the coronavirus, and there is indeed just so much fear prevalent everywhere. And how do I deal with that? It's like, well, externally for me, the form of my life is different. You know, we're on the podcast Behind the Grid. If you're not necessarily connected to this grid of, I don't know, um, media hysteria, like, you don't necessarily have that same reaction. So if you can manage your reaction to it, then you can give yourself some distance, really. I mean, to me, it's not as big of a deal. I mean, I certainly understand there's dangers, and I certainly wish all the people sick, all the elderly who could be hurt, I wish people would take care of them. I wish people would cater to them. What I really wish as well is that people manage their emotions, manage their reactions, that we wouldn't give in so easily as a society to this culture of fear. You know, we don't need to just jump on the 24-hour news cycle of anxiety. And it's just, well, I think, to be honest, that is the work that you have to do. As an awakened person, you need to manage this reaction, and you need to be okay with that. You need to be at a deeper peace inside of yourself, accepting both aspects of the duality of good, bad, evil, everything, you know. So you need to be able to come to peace with that. And that's a challenge, but it's the work we have to do.
Yeah, and in addition to that, in addition to watching your reaction, there's a logical next step of, don't even put yourself in a situation unnecessarily where you have to constantly take in this fear agenda that they're throwing out at us. Like, you don't have to watch the news, like you were saying. You don't have to be watching all of all of your friends' little scare clips. I call them fear rituals. But all of these people from around my friends list are popping in saying, "Hey, do this fear ritual," and it's so funny. I made my own version of it, and I told people, don't do the fear ritual. Just black out your media. Like, just get off social media, get off the news, just take some distance. And that was my suggestion to everybody else's suggestions. But most people, I think, are enjoying the entertainment of everything.
That's funny. Yeah, I see what you're saying. I mean, it's definitely good to not be so immersed in it. I think it's good to be informed. I definitely would tend to. Yeah, I agree. I mean, it's good to not get so involved, and I think it's good to be involved in the sense that we are providing a different way of relating with the problem, right? There's a problem. We don't need to come from a place of fear and panic about it. We need to have concern, naturally. Yeah, but I wouldn't be getting in any fear rituals. I don't know. I'm not looking for any fear rituals anytime soon.
Yeah, one of the things I was noticing is that people are sharing all of these like different ways of being healthy and safe, but the reality is there's like nobody's talking about the obvious ones, like, you know, move more, stop eating garbage, like stop eating sugar especially. And then I found it insane recently. In Canada, they're going to be closing down all the stores because, you know, they want to completely destroy small businesses, I guess. They're closing down all the stores and they're leaving only open the grocery store and then the liquor board, the LCBO. Like, why do people need liquor right now? That's not good for your immune system. What the heck? It's like it's just so silly to me, the way that everything is being dealt with. It just shows me that they don't really want a solution.
Gotta get your liquor.
But Andrew, I want to go back to a key point because I don't think you fully answered this. But what part of your mind is creating your external reality right now?
Oh, what part? Well, okay. I'll just take it back to some traditional teachings. In Hinduism, yoga teachings, they say there is the name and form, okay? Form, the universe of form, the physical universe. The name, as I've said, the word, the name, the vibration, language. They actually say that the word is prime, like the world is before the form. I mean, the name is before the form. So that's basically how I look at it. I always monitor the internal dialogue happening and see how it creates, see it as the force of creation. And I cultivate an internal dialogue that I would like to experience, you know? So that is truly the force. That's the force of creation in your life. And, or at least it's a good landmark to monitor because it's what you can control.
So you're saying that there are some sort of words in your mind right now which you have adopted from some source or another, which are manifesting, creating your external reality.
Right.
Would that be an accurate summary?
Yeah.
So then what words do you feel are in your mind that are creating the coronavirus?
That's interesting. It's an interesting point because how you conceptualize of the virus may determine your experience, right? Or perhaps it determined its coming, right? So, I don't know. You can conceive of it in a number of ways. I find it interesting to think of it as a force, a cosmological force, okay? You think of it as the solar wind escaping from the coronal hole in the sun and coming to Earth, creating a geoelectromagnetic storm that manifests in, say, a virus, biological virus. Hypothetically, of course, we're talking just hypothetically, but how can you conceptualize of it creatively in a way that's different? Like, okay, there's this really beautiful talk. It's called Where This Is Water. What's that guy? He's like this really awesome. What's his name? I have a book by him. David Foster Wallace. He has this really epic commencement speech where he basically says, we're like fish who are thirsty or something and we're in water, we're in water. This is water that we're in. We're surrounded by it. It's pervading it, but we're not even aware. What is water? That's what the fish is asking. This is water. And where was I going with that? But yeah, so in it he says people get so caught up in this, the mundanity of their daily lives. They're at a grocery store. There's a long line. There's a long line in the grocery store, and all they're thinking about is how it's this and that person's fault that they're going to have to wait. They don't think creatively. If you wanted to think creatively about it, you would say, okay, maybe this lady in front of me who's barking at the cashier just had someone die in her life. Maybe something happened to her. And if you had that, if you could have the creativity or the capacity to have that thought, you would have an emotional response. You would feel good. You would feel empathy. You would feel connected to another human being, and you would be able to access all your different perceptions, right? It's just going up to a different chakra. It's going to the heart chakra, or in this case, a different chakra. He's in the Svadhisthana. This is water. He's saying just go up from the root chakra, go to a different plane of perception, and think creatively about what is happening. So for the coronavirus, is it a cosmological force from the sun? Or what is it? Is it a being? Is it a person? Is it Madame Corona, who has come here to teach you to sit inside of yourself in peace and calm? Or is it here? Is it an enemy? Is it a monster, a hidden monster coming to attack you and kill your grandparent? Like, what is the coronavirus to you, and how will you conceptualize of it? How will you think about it in a way that is beneficial for yourself, for other people?
Yeah, and that's a really positive way to frame it, because there's so many different ways that you can perceive it. And I make my life really easy. Whenever the media is saying there's a way to perceive it, I know right off the bat that's the way I'm not going to perceive it. I know that's one of the worst, most useless ways to perceive it, that gives up my power and my control. So the way that I'm perceiving it right now is that this is a force of change bringing about the new era, and the new era of more of a feminine and masculine balance, with the femininity coming to the spotlight, especially. Right. And people are going to not be so top-down hierarchical. It's going to be more of a community-based decision-making. Although you're still going to need hierarchies. Like, you're not saying these forces won't be necessary. It's just going to be the way that people go about things are going to be different. And I think a lot of the big powers are going to be shifting out. So this is the way I'm choosing to see it. I'm not even saying it's true. This is just, I'm seeing it like this because it gives me hope for my future. Yeah. And that's generally, this goes back to the whole purpose of me doing this podcast and this show, is to look at worldviews as technologies, and as not thinking about them necessarily as true or false, but looking at them more for their utility and their pragmatism. Right. So yeah, what are your thoughts on that?
I find that as a useful way of thinking about it. So I think, like, at least in your network, you have a node of relationships, and that to a large degree impacts your perception of the world, right? So how you perceive of it, and how someone who lives in, I don't know, somewhere in America watching Fox News perceives of it may be completely different. And who's right? Who knows exactly where we're going to go? It doesn't really matter necessarily, because if you can bring your positive message into your network, that's really that's what the practical purpose of it is, I think. But yeah, I think, I don't know. It's a good question.
Yeah, it's one I've been thinking about for a while now, and that's just one of the ways I'm perceiving it, to be honest. Like I'm saying I'm perceiving it that way, and it's because I have to have a concise way of explaining it right now. But I have like 3 different ways of seeing it, and I think it's good to have that flexibility when you're looking at any any subject, like any concept, whether it's reality, God, or some specific event, or yourself, or your personality, or any little problem that comes up in your life, it's
Yeah.
good to be able to see it from multiple angles and get those different perceptions, because each of the perceptions will have strong points and weak points.
No doubt. No doubt. I think, okay, it's interesting how you were saying. Yes. What do we know in our particular nodes, right? What do we know? What am I experiencing as an awakened individual, somewhat removed from the mass frantic scene, mass frantic hysterical, culture of whatever, panic. What I'm seeing is that my normal state is spilling over to those around me. People are forced to look inside. They're forced to be indoors, but they're forced to look inside of themselves. Yeah. What is it doing? Like, what is the virus doing exactly? Is it establishing a balance between masculine and feminine? Is it going to herald a new age? It's a good question.
I'm using it very abstractly there, because like for me, inwardness is feminine. Like think yin, not necessarily feminine, like the archetype.
Yeah, well, that's interesting. Okay. Looking at it in terms of my linguistic view, right? The word is God. God is the word. Even the word you use is actually God itself. So if you are repeating the words of God inside, God is light. But the word is with God. What's with God? In a lot of, in Christianity, God is seen as the Father. It's one of the archetypes that are used in Christianity. But what's with the Father, the word vibratory universe in many cultures, including Hinduism, is seen as the mother, or the divine feminine, the goddess. The word is with God. The vibratory universe is God. When we can speak, when we can use the language of spirit, we're connecting with the divine feminine, in my experience. So is it heralding this new age? Are we going to connect with the universe as a whole, the divine feminine? Perhaps. How could we do that? Well, we could learn to think in this different way, right? We could learn to go inside. We could be forced in from the outside. We're forced in by a virus to look inside and connect with this language.
Kind of like you were forced in initially with the concussion.
Exactly.
Yeah, and it's interesting because I want to highlight a key point here, because in your story, you could have took the approach that life is not fair, and you could have blamed people, and maybe you did for a while, but you got to this point where you just started to make the best of your situation. You were like, okay, it's not fair, but this is what's happening in my experience. And you opportunistically looked for the best ways to use this experience. And I'm saying that in a positive way. So you found a way to use that experience to transform yourself. And in the same way, we can all be using this experience, whether it's a conspiracy against us, or it's some natural plague, or whatever your framework is. It's an opportunity to not dive too much into, is it fair or not, or whose fault is it, but to look inward and saying, okay, since this is happening, since there's a mass hysteria going on in my society, what can I do right now to grow my own spiritual awareness? Maybe
it truly is a message from China. There's an old, what do they call it, adage or whatever it's called. It's in chaos, there's opportunity. That's from China. The virus is from China. Maybe they're teaching us something, it's a way to awaken. You get some type of trauma from the outside shocking you into openness, right? Where you become receptive. You become able to accept different energies, right? Different ways of perceiving. And perhaps we can settle into that yin, which is also a Chinese symbol. the yin. We could use the opportunity of this chaos to connect with our yin nature, and that seems like a solid way of conceiving of the meaning of the virus. See what the East could bring us, along with, if we're perceiving them with fear and blame. These Chinese people, they shouldn't have bats serving in these open food markets. No. Okay, they do that, but they also give you the message of opportunity, chaos, and the receptive nature that's part of the universe in balance.
Yeah, yeah, I like the way you see it there. Seeing the different ways that you can take the positive aspects of it, and
Yes.
looking. I think it's kind of funny that you look at the origin as Chinese and you're finding Chinese insights.
Yeah. That's what their spirit is telling us.
Yeah, I mean, who knows, man? Yeah, there's a lot of value. A lot of value. Maybe everyone needs to start doing qigong or something.
Yeah, let's do it. I would be open to that.
Yeah. There's so many different ways that you can approach reality. There's so many different perspectives that you can take, right? But finding one that really offers value to you and value to your life, so that you can grow and reach your goals, is really profound. Recently, Karen, who's my partner, she decided to look up what happened in the Great Depression and who got richest in the Great Depression and how they did it. So I love the way her mind is working. Like, she's saying, okay, there is this situation going on. Where in history can I take inspiration from? Where I can get some sort of insights as to what actions I can take now, so that I can come out on top of this topsy-turvy situation. Yeah. And
so what did she?
Yeah, what did she? I know. I have to tell you the answers now.
Some notes.
So I mean, you'll like this, Andrew. But she said that a lot more people turn to spirituality and religion.
Yeah.
And if we can get people in the spirituality side and not in the dogmatic religion side, I think there's a lot of growth that can happen. I mean, if people need the dogma, they need the dogma, though. It's something.
Right.
And then she said, believe it or not, entertainers and athletes actually got rich because people really needed entertainment during this time. So it's something they actively sought. So I find it interesting because Karen's going into a spiritual entertainment industry, so she's right on point. And I guess this podcast is too. It's like spiritual entertainment in a way. So I guess I'm on point too. And then you're a spiritual teacher, so you're on point.
Yes, we're aligned. We're providing a message. We're providing a message because we're receptive to the conditions that are in front of us, right? We found meaning in it. And it doesn't mean to say that it's bogus. Like, if you can find a meaning, is that less real than your typical, worldview? Just because you've creatively conceived of something. I think really what it proves is that everything is relative, and that truth is relative, truth.
That's such an interesting point when you say truth is relative. The way that I see it is anything expressed in words is relative. Mm-hmm. So if I'm putting it into words, it's no longer true. And the best I could do is point at truth, but I can't actually be truth. Yeah. And then I believe that truth exists, but it's not called truth, and it's not called anything. And and it's just there just is this thing that is beyond words that you can experience and you can kind of point to, and then even then it's hard to call that truth. But
yeah, no doubt it's it's inexplicable. We can definitely say that. We can talk about it, we can use the language of the spirit to communicate about it and with it, but can we ultimately capture it? Can we, cling to it? No. It's not in time, right?
Okay, Andrew, here's a test.
Oh.
1 plus 1 is 2. Prove that's wrong.
Okay, well, let's see here. If I go outside of my sense of measurement, if there's no way, if I go outside a dimension of measurement, we'll say, and I'm looking at things without measuring them, then the thing you say is one is not one to me, because it's not really anything. It's just what it is. So there's my answer.
I love that. That's exactly how I tackle that one too. That's quite frankly, that is exactly how you can deconstruct anything, any argument, absolutely anything. You just go right for the definition of like the first few words, like whatever the key word is, you go right for the definition of that, and you say, I challenge that definition.
I challenge it.
Every definition falls apart somewhere. So
right, everything's relative.
Everything. Yeah.
Yep.
So I mean, technically, you could have challenged that from many different angles. You could have gone 1 plus 1 is 2, right? So there's the construct 1, construct plus, the construct is, which is like, I guess, equal to, and then the construct 2. And you could have targeted any one of those 4 constructs that build up that strong statement of 1 plus 1 is 2. And you could have taken it down from any of those legs.
Yep, you can do it. There's no 2.
So then the flip side is, well, what's the value of that? Like, why is that worth doing? Are we just being facetious? Are we just trying to create conflict for the sake of conflict? Andrew, if you had to answer why it's worth doing that, what would you say the value of that deconstruction is?
Oh, well, okay. So you get trapped in your ways of thinking, because whenever Buddhist philosophy, when you have a thought wave, it creates an imprint. You get trapped in these imprints. You get trapped in these tendencies, okay? And how do you get free of it? How do you get free of these tendencies? Well, one way is to see that it's that it's limited, that it's a relative truth. When you can see that something's a relative truth, it doesn't have a hold on you. You don't have a stake in it as your conception of the universe. It's not everything. It's not absolutely true. If this isn't real, why does it matter? It doesn't. So you can get free of these thoughts. And if it's a negative, if it has a negative emotional association, like it has a negative emotional connection built into your body, and you want to get free of that because it's causing pain and suffering, then there is definitely incentive. It's obvious, right? You just want to be free of this negativity and your pain and suffering. So what do? You see the mistruth, you see the relative nature of your thoughts, of your point of view, of whatever it is that has a hold on you in that way, like whatever it is that is causing your mind a preoccupation, you could say.
Yeah, I love that. So whenever you find there's some construct that's holding you and trapping you, you can start to deconstruct it with this analysis, this critical analysis. And I find that the best ways to deconstruct things are to look at edge cases of it, to look at like where's the line between it and its opposite, like really find that gray spot, and then the whole thing usually just blurs apart. And then the other way is you can look into its origin, like how was this thing formed? Where did this construct start? And then you can kind of like, you can see it when it was a baby and it's not such a big thing anymore.
No, absolutely. Those are great strategies. Contradiction of extreme cases. It's true, like usually we have heuristics or rules of thumb to how we act and think. So when we see a boundary case, it could not conform necessarily to our expectations.
So, Andrew, what would you say is one of the biggest constructs that are holding back people who are looking to grow spiritually right now? So,
Hmm.
people like you and I, who maybe are stuck somewhere, maybe we have a
Yeah.
blind spot. What would one of those constructs be? Let's see if we can deconstruct it now.
Yeah. Okay. Well, people well, okay, I don't want to say people. All of us have the tendency towards wanting to be good, wanting to. We have certain like behavioral expectations, that aren't we don't necessarily know where they come from, right? You say, like, you look at the origin of your thoughts. Well, a lot of these are conditioned, a lot of them weren't consciously put in. So um, basically you just need to look at the formative patterns, right? What created it, and what exactly are those? Well, for an example, how about for spiritual people in particular? How about, well, um, okay, this is a fun one. I had a fun one with this one. This is about relationships in the like the modern conception of relationships and single people. So a while ago, Emma Watson, Hermione Granger, really solid witch, if you ask me. But she posted that she was, what was it? She was in a relationship with herself. She was like self-partnering was the word. And yeah, it caused quite a stir, especially for a woman. You know, self-partnering seems weak, or it seems, like, evolutionarily, biologically, it's not optimal. So that's a drive that you would have that would maybe, speak to that. But it's interesting. So for people being single, a spiritual person on a spiritual path, a lot of the path happens internally. And when you want to, if you are trying to get into a relationship to deny that, then okay, right? You need to be able to be willing to accept that dimension of self-partnering, even though it's not a thing in society that is accepted, as shown by the reaction to Emma Watson, who's a famous movie star, has all of the success, yet got a negative reaction from some people for claiming she was self-partnering. That's why she did it. She did it to provoke the reaction, speak of it. I thought it was a cool concept, interesting concept, especially coming for me personally as a single person on a spiritual path where I'm not totally preoccupied with relationship. Not saying I don't like it. For example, I spoke earlier about the yoga relationship to which I partake. But yeah, if you can examine any concept in that way, any of the norms or conditioned realities that are placed upon you, then that's a way to be free of the emotions accompanying it.
So if I were to look at that concept of being single, the way I would start to attack it, and maybe this is too aggressive as language, but
No, fine.
I would look at the edge case of single. I'd say, okay, what does it mean to be single? It,
Yeah,
if I'm in a relationship with somebody, I'm not single. That's
yeah,
what they're saying. So then
yeah.
what if you're in a relationship with somebody, but you're not really having sex with them? Are you single? Are you not single? Like, I mean, you could conceive of a relationship where they're not very sexually intimate, and yet the person would
Yeah,
still call themselves
yeah.
not single. So then you would say, okay, so if I'm in a relationship, but I'm not having sex with people, am I
Yeah.
single or not single? So then you would look, okay, do I have relationships where I'm not having sex with people?
Yeah.
Well, I mean, Andrew, you and I right now,
Yeah.
we have a relationship and we're not having sex. So maybe neither of
Yeah.
us are
Yeah.
single. So, see, you know what I mean? Like, you can just break down this whole idea, like, single, are we alone on this planet? Like, where did this
Single.
concept come from?
Well,
of being
look at it this way. It's the reverse of 1 + 1 is 2. It's just one, man. It's just one person. And if you want to add in the contemporary, like, romantic, facade or whatever that accompanies the idea of a relationship in this culture, then that is basically what she was speaking about, I believe.
self-romance.
Self-romance, interesting concept. Be in love with yourself.
Yeah, I mean that's really interesting. I don't even know what that fully means, but I can imagine that spending time to do kind things for yourself that you would do for somebody else, but you might not do for yourself, but to actually do that for yourself, I could see that as being a very healing path for somebody who may be identifying themselves as single in any given moment.
Yeah, right. Just yeah, it's definitely interesting. Like, if you were to engage in romantic behaviors, like, for example, well, you could even go a step further and ask, what is romance? Because romance, modern definition of romance, is not actually what the word originally means. If you look at a literary definition of romance, it's about people on a quest, but essentially a spiritual quest. It's about
Wow.
someone. Yeah. So if you think about that, then you look at that. They're and they go through challenges. They go through many different challenges on their way to achieving some spiritual aim, some or acquiring some, some goal at the end. And the challenges are part and parcel of this quest. It's not all what modern rose-colored view is about. So if you can have a romance with yourself in this way, then I would say it is an interesting way to look at it yourself. And what would a behavior like that mean? Like, what beautiful, lofty spiritual ideals would you give to, would you use to give to yourself? What amazingly heroic acts would you do for yourself on a day-to-day basis, just out of some code of conduct that you have, like a knight's code of love towards oneself? That's pretty beautiful, I would say.
Yeah, that's some inspiring stuff right there, man. Like a true
Yeah.
occultist, you know your etymology. Yeah, no, well done. There's a lot there. There's a lot there for sure.
Yeah.
I want to take another
Yeah.
stab at this. I think one of the other things that's holding people back in our spiritual society is money. I think people
Yeah.
have a lot of views about money that are really dark, and then sometimes people even have views of money that are really positive, but I don't often find too many people that have a very balanced view of money. So Andrew, if you were to deconstruct the word money and liberate everybody
Mm.
with money
Yeah.
constructs, how would you go about doing that?
Yeah. Oh, well, it's a fascinating topic, undoubtedly. I mean, isn't it just so cool now too, when the economic system has come to like a screeching halt? And what does it mean? What do all these plans of money mean? Like, it's an interesting topic, you know. I find when people struggle, that you can be ungrounded, and really, money is like anything, you need to give to get. You need to be not so attached to money that you think that you need to hoard it, but you can't just write it off as something that's evil and non-existent, because that's what you need to function, and it's the system that's in place. You're a part of this system, so you need to work with it to a certain degree. So how do you work with it? Do you have the typical, like, like, whatever, like, the typical concepts about it? Do you work a 9 to 5 job, hoard money, save for retirement, blah blah blah? Or do you do it like anything else, and do you give money with compassion? Do you use your money with compassion, and is there some web of denial that you're caught in? Like, can you be free with money? That's the most important thing, is to have the ability to use money and be free while you're using it. It's like, if you can be in the flow of giving and use money as a vehicle, valid vehicle to, to be a part of that force, then I say, look at it. Look at yourself. You're successful. You're a successful person. You're a wealthy person in a certain sense.
Yeah. Yeah. I love how immediately you went right to giving as a way of discussing money, because money is just one form of energy and one form of power. In tarot, money is one of the meanings of pentacles. It's one of the meanings of earth energy, and there's so many different ways that money is, or sorry, power is manifest in the physical plane. And like, you could see it as gold, you could see it as food, it could be animals, it could be relationships would be another element, but there's so many different ways that power can come to an individual. And I think the key archetype between for getting power in your life is to give power to others as well. And in that way, when you lift other people up, they'll naturally lift you up as well. And that you could say this economy of generosity supports all who are involved, and it goes beyond money, well beyond money. It's if I'm looking out for you, Andrew, I know you'll look out for me too. And even if there's some people who are maybe too hurt to actually return the favor, or too down on their luck, somebody else somewhere else will support you when just because that's how the universe works with karma, like you were saying at the beginning of the conversation. Yeah.
No, I totally feel that. Like, give to get. And I think we can be economic in our generosity. We can give when appropriate. You need to honor the economic dimension in your survival dimension and how it's related to money. But you can't forget about everything else. You can't forget about, just your humanity and your love. So when you can use the financial system but not be trapped by it, that's when you're in a good place, I would say.
Yeah, 100%, man. And one of the things that this brought to mind is you were mentioning the Christian philosophy earlier, and something stood out to me about there being this one church that I think St. Paul talked about, where he mentioned that there was this church that was so poor in money, like they didn't have a lot of money, but their spirits were so good that the thing that they prayed for is that they would have money to be able to give to other people, just so they could have the pleasure and the honor of giving. And I thought that was so beautiful, because I think even though they may have been, they didn't have much money specifically, their spirits were clearly in a place of abundance, which is really beautiful to see.
I'm grateful for you having me on. I really enjoyed the conversation. It was nice to catch up with you, man. I haven't seen you in a while.
Yeah, it's great to see you again, man. All right. Much love, Andrew. Thanks for coming on.
Yeah, you too, man.